Senate called Out of the Shadows at Last. Anybody here see that report when it came out? Well, you know, that is the fate of all Senate reports, is that they tend to hold up coffee tables. But this one had 118 recommendations, principal of which was the creation of a mental health commission at a national level to try to drive mental health reform. And indeed, it was enacted by Stephen Harper. And I say that because it was imagined by Michael Kirby, long-standing liberal backroom boy, and enacted by a very Tory Prime Minister. And I make that point only to emphasize that this is a nonpartisan issue. Every party is focused on mental health, and in part because of the ubiquity of mental illness, it's personal for every single politician. For Stephen Harper, as much as for Bob Rae. Bob Rae's written about his own struggle as a young man with depression right after he came off his Rhodes Scholarship and struggled for a year with severe depression and responded to psychotherapy. Stephen Harper has a grandfather who was a very popular high school principal in Moncton, New Brunswick, who had a significant mental illness and then disappeared and was widely assumed to have drowned himself in the river. So it's personal for everyone. We have our federal labor minister, Lisa Raitt, talking about her own struggle with postpartum depression and speaking about it very, very openly. So the times are changing. So the Mental Health Commission of Canada gets set up in 2007 with a mandate to act as a catalyst for improving the mental health system and for changing the attitudes and behaviors of Canadians around mental health. Now, the Commission is a national organization, and if you think about the constitutional framework for health in Canada, it's federal, provincial, and territorial. There is no national healthcare system, right? There is in the Canada Health Act the principle of universality, but the feds have responsibility for health for very narrow slices of the population. Aboriginals on reserve, people in federal prison, the RCMP, and the Canadian Armed Forces. Everything else is provincial and territorial. So we actually sit as an arm's-length organization funded by the federal government, but not part of the federal government. We only account to them once a year. We sit outside the constitutional framework of health. The upside of that is it allows us to be nimble. It allows us to interact with all three levels of government in the back rooms as a, well, as I should say in this building, a consigliere. We get to provide advice, we get to catalyze things, we get to have the candid discussions that will never occur in a public arena, like a federal provincial health conference. The downside, of course, is that we don't control the resources for health or for mental health, but we do influence how those resources get deployed. Now, when we were set up, we were given a mandate to do three things. Number one, to create a national mental health strategy, because Canada was alone among the G8 countries in not having it. Number two was to develop, implement, and evaluate a sustained and multidimensional campaign against stigma and discrimination like this country has never seen, around the fundamental belief that unless you change attitudes and behaviors towards people with mental illness and their families, nothing else is going to flow. And number three was to raise the level of literacy and dialogue through the creation of a national and virtual knowledge exchange center, which we maintain on our website. Now, all of you know we're trapped in the world of Web 2.0, where there is no filter for quality. And all of you as clinicians have had patients and clients come into you with reams of printouts from the night before their appointment about, are you familiar with this? Are you aware of that? And you're scrambling through it, and of course you have no idea the level of quality associated with this kind of stuff. So we do need a filter for quality. We need a single reliable website where Canadians, both professionals and the general public, as well as individuals struggling and their families, can go to for high-quality, filtered, and reliable information. But before we signed our agreement with the federal government about our mandate, including those three things, Mike Kirby slipped in one more line, said, and other projects as they arise from time to time, just to keep that door open a tiny crack. And that turned out to be a godsend. A year later, on top of our annual budget of about $15 million to run the commission for 10 years, the government gave us a windfall of $110 million in cash. And this was a cash transfer to the Mental Health Commission of Canada in the spring of 2008, just before the recession hit. And it was to design and to implement a project called At Home Chez Soi. Is that name familiar to anyone in this room? So let me tell you why you should feel proud to be Canadian at this point. Through the Mental Health Commission, we've been running the world's largest project on homelessness and mental illness in 5 Canadian cities: Vancouver, Winnipeg, Toronto, Montreal, and Moncton. And we've enrolled over 2,000 homeless, mentally ill Canadians in a randomized clinical trial, where they're randomized to either housing first, in which case they're offered a choice of furnished and supported housing within 24 to 48 hours, or treatment as usual. And treatment as usual sometimes includes housing, but more often it includes shelters, emergency rooms, jails. And this study, which will be completed in 2013, is the largest ever study of its kind. It's already being replicated now in 4 cities in France using our methodology, and is going to have a profound influence on governments in Canada and elsewhere, on those individuals that we all know sleeping on grates in downtown cores all over this country. It's going to be interesting, actually, in the wake of Hurricane Sandy. Keep your eyes on New York and New Jersey. They've got 30 to 40,000 new homeless people. And they're going to have to come up with some innovative solutions around sudden onset homelessness. And that kind of adversity breeds innovation. So we should watch that channel very closely. Another thing that we're doing is administering a program called Mental Health First Aid. This is a training program for people, much like physical first aid, to recognize signs and symptoms that somebody may be struggling with a mental illness, and how to be really a first responder, a little bit more than just a friend, in the same way that you might learn how to bandage somebody or to do CPR. That course, which we offer now across the country, and which we're adapting for First Nations and Inuit populations. So far we've trained up 60,000 Canadians in mental health first aid, and that is going to continue to mushroom. But what I want to talk to you about this morning is the mental health strategy for Canada. This is the thick version. This is available in English and French. It's also available as a free download on our website. The website is Mental Health Commission, all one word, .ca. And there you can download not only this, but indeed all of the many publications and projects of the Mental Health Commission. And I would encourage you to go to that website. And I'm pleased to tell you that on the table outside, there are executive summaries of the mental health strategy for Canada, in case you don't want to wade through the rather voluminous document in itself. This development, this mental health strategy, took a huge amount of collaboration and partnership. We did it in a classic Canadian way. We consulted everybody. We did consultations from coast to coast to coast. We did them in person, we did them online. And we've got great data on who contributed: health professionals, the general public, people with lived experience of mental illness. And by the way, that is just at the level of language. That's the term that we use at the Mental Health Commission. As you know, it's highly politicized around patient, client, consumer, survivor, user, right? And there are all kinds of camps. When you look at how few people with mental health problems and illnesses, and that's another piece of language I'll explain, when you look at how few people access the help they need, many of them don't get to be patients or clients or consumers or users or survivors. What they all share, though, is lived experience. So we talk about people with lived experience. And we talk about mental health problems and illnesses around the idea that not all problems are illnesses, but we're not going to shy away from the reality that there are illnesses out there. The phrase I can't stand is issues. People say, I have mental health issues. Because nobody with cancer says, I have cell proliferation issues. I have neoplastic issues. They say, I have cancer. And I think that when we venture into the land of euphemism, we unwittingly collaborate with avoidance and shame. We should call things what they are. So it took us 5 years to do this strategy. Now people said, you know, you could have probably written that strategy in a week. And you know, we probably could have put a team together. This way they sometimes build a hospital in China. They do it, you know, in a long weekend. It's unbelievable how quickly they can put up structures. But we did it in a very Canadian way because the buy-in was extremely important. And we didn't want a lot of people in Canada to say, well, we were never asked. And that buy-in, by the way, had to include the 3 levels of government, because ultimately they're the ones who are going to be charged with